Welcome to Breaking the Silence Mental Health Conversations with your hosts, Kim Olver and Dr. Richard Doss. Together, we'll break the silence and challenge the stigma by speaking now. So, take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's dive in. It's time to start the conversation.
Welcome to Breaking the Silence, Conversations about Mental Health. My name is Kim Olver, licensed counselor, and my partner here is Dr. Richard Doss, clinical psychologist. And today we'd like to talk about expectations and disappointments in relationships. So, I don't know about you, but I know that I've experienced some expectations and some mismet expectations, which led to some disappointments. And it caused some challenges in relationships. So I thought maybe some of the audience had experienced that as well, Richard. What do you think? Have you?
So undoubtedly, expectations are the thing that really set the stage for disappointment. So I've had expectations and I've been disappointed. Full disclosure, my wife is perfect.
I'm sorry.
And she's never let me down. And I've had great expectations, and she's always met them all. So of course that's not true. So we made it through marriage counseling, and it made a difference. So here's what I'll say. Here is the real disclaimer. So I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I had to go to marriage counseling. My wife and I had to go to marriage counseling because it was just some stuff that, we weren't on the same page on. There's some things that, while, most of my clients think I'm perfect, I'm just, I'd be just the ideal husband. I'm human too. I'm human too.
Have you possibly let your wife down in your relationship? Could that have happened once or twice?
I'm thinking that it may have happened. It may have happened. Why do you have car parts in our living room? That's one of those.
Or the bathtub.
Right. So that's how we do it. So we'll start the conversation with we're human. We make mistakes. And one of the things that I believe, and we'll talk about this, is that so some people say, well, everybody should know that, or that's just common sense, and I don't think everybody knows anything, and I challenge the phrase common sense. I didn't grow up with you. You didn't grow up with me. We don't have the same parents. We don't have the same backgrounds. We don't have the same experiences. And so what ends up happening, I think a lot of times, is our expectations get distorted because of our experiences. And so, if mom and dad was a certain way, then maybe I think that I'm supposed to be like dad was, or the woman that I meet is supposed to be like mom was, and that's just not how it works. So I think there's a lot of stuff to talk about. This is a real meaty topic, and as we have the conversation, I think we're going to dip into areas that are sensitive to some people, and hopefully what'll happen is we'll talk about some things that maybe you haven't thought about, maybe you don't realize that you're doing. Let's have our conversation.
So I just want to add to what you've already said, and that is, when I was first married, the first year of my marriage was one of the hardest years for me. I went from being a single female who lived in my own space by myself. I had finished college, I had my own apartment, and then all of a sudden I have a partner, a husband, that not that I had to report where I was at every minute of the day, but I felt a responsibility to let him know what I was doing. I had to check in before spending money, just things like that. And it was a really hard adjustment for me, and I wanted to go to marriage counseling. And my husband said, well, you go ahead, but I think our marriage is fine. I don't need to go. So I actually went to marriage counseling by myself. Wow. And it also helped me. And that's one of the things that I actually is a signature thing for me. I do couples counseling with one half of the couple if the second person in the couple is reluctant to come. So, and it makes a difference because one person can change a relationship. You are connected, and when one person changes, the other person needs to change to accommodate. Sometimes that change is what you hope for, sometimes it's not. I can't predict what the change will be, but I know that there'll be a shift because you've changed. So if you're out there and you're thinking that you need some help with your relationship, don't be afraid to go by yourself, at least initially, because it can make a big difference.
So, one of the things that I teach is that there's only one thing that you have control over, and that's you. You don't have the power to change anybody. You don't have the power to change your spouse. You don't have the power to change your boyfriend or your girlfriend. And watch this. A lot of times we don't even have the power to change our children, right? And so, coming in with the idea that I am going to be able to change somebody, that's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope. Especially if I'm thinking, well, after I make these changes or after we get married, then, my partner will change and become the person that I always thought that my spouse would be.
Yes. Yeah, and a lot of people get married with that idea. When I teach choice theory training, I start with two questions.
Okay.
The first one is obviously rhetorical because most people know the answer, and that's what you just said. Whose behavior can you control? And everybody pretty much knows that you can only control your own behavior. But the second question is, whose behavior do you try to control all day long? And they start to think, and they get a little embarrassed, and the words that usually come out of people's mouths is everybody else's. Wow. And that includes our partner. And we do it in so many obvious and subtle ways. And one of the things that probably the most impactful thing I ever heard about expectations was a quote from a man named Kyle Cease on the speaking circuit.
Okay.
And
he's great.
Do you know Kyle?
Wow, yeah.
Yeah,
great.
see, I heard him say this one thing, and it was like, it was a total mind blower for me. He said, no one's ever broken your heart. They've broken your expectations. When I heard that, I was like, whoa, wait a minute, because I could name a couple of people in my life that I'm pretty sure broke my heart. But when I thought about what he said, I thought, no, he's so right. They broke my expectations, and who the heck is in charge of my expectations but me? So then it was a hard reality to accept I've actually broken my own darn heart. Wow. I don't have anybody else to blame for that. So part of my mental freedom program that we've talked about before is about letting go of expectations of other people. You can certainly have expectations for yourself, but I also add to that, unless you're a perfectionist, you might want to adjust some of your expectations, because perfectionistic people tend to have ridiculous, impossible expectations for themselves. And when they don't meet them, they beat themselves up. And that does not help them do better. It tends to demoralize people. So certainly have expectations for yourself. If you're a perfectionist, gear them back a little bit. But let's stop having expectations of other people, even our partners, even our children. Of course, one of the other things that goes along with expectations is you can usually trust people to be the person they've shown you they are, right? So if you have a partner that's always late, trust that they're going to be late. I mean, that's just the thing. They're going to be late. So either, ask them to be ready 15 minutes early, tell them the party starts at 7:30 when it really starts at 8 o'clock, build in some extra time that way, or drive separately, or go by yourself. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do. You can also expect something from another person and they don't deliver, but you don't get mad at that person. Especially if it's your spouse, you just figure out, okay, I was counting on this, it didn't happen, so now what do I need to do? And figure it out.
So one of the things that I've had concerns about, and I talk to my clients about, is the idea that I think a lot of these expectations would probably be best if we talked about them before we got married. Okay. No, right.
No,
Right.
I'm laughing because you mentioned common sense, and I always say common sense isn't always common.
Right.
So you're right. It does not make a lot of sense. The challenge with that is people don't often know what their expectations are until they're not met.
Ooh.
And they're not stressed until you're in the marriage already.
Wow.
So it makes it hard to talk about ahead of time because this thing called assumptions. You don't assume what you expect is something you have to talk about. You just assume it's the way it's going to be.
Wow. So, as I think about the expectations that we have, and I think about the expectations, that I had, sometimes I hear women talk about the expectations of, the man being like their father and taking care of them financially like their father took care of their mother. And then I hear men have this conversation. They're dating and they're having sex regularly, and they say to the guys, yeah, I'm about to get married. And they pat him on the back and say, man, it's been good knowing you, because you ain't going to have no sex no more. And so the question then becomes, what expectations are realistic and what expectations are unrealistic? As a single man, the illusion is that I can have sex all the time. And I think a part of what at least men are taught is that if you get married and you make her legit, now, man, y'all gonna have sex all the time.
Whenever you want it.
I don't know if that is how that works.
Well, I wrote a book called Secrets of Happy Couples, and in there I talk about the sex romance dance. And I think that when you are dating, sex and romance is something that is very high on your list of priorities. You're dousing each other in sex and romance all the time, and it feels so good. It's part of those endorphins. It's what helps people feel like they're in love.
Yeah.
Then you get married, and there's nothing magic about making a lifetime commitment that's going to, change everything. And what happens after people get married is life. Life happens. You have a job, maybe your partner has a job, you have friends, your partner has friends, there's problems, there's financial stress and wait a year or two and you might have children, and then that brings on more stress. And as life happens, we tend to pull back a little on our outpouring of sex and romance. And when that happens, whoever initiates the withholding first, and it's not usually a big deal, it's not really even that noticeable.
Hold on. What Kim just said is somebody might be holding sex hostage.
Well, just not as the priority that it used to be, right? Because I got something else on my mind. So, yeah, and that's another story. We can talk about holding sex hostage because it happens. And from a female's perspective, I can also say that romance can be held hostage as well. So it's not just a one-sided thing.
Wow.
This happens with both people, and I don't think it's anybody's fault. I think it's just something to be aware of to try to protect against. So as life happens, you tend to pull back in those areas. And usually what happens, if you survey couples, you'll have one person in the couple who prioritizes sex and the other prioritizes romance. It's rare that you'll have both people say sex is more important than romance, or both people say romance is more important than sex. It's usually a thing where you're on opposite ends, which is okay. It provides some balance. So when one person pulls back, the other person pulls back too, a lot of times out of insecurity. Because when there's a change, because we tend to be egocentric, we think there's something wrong with us. We cause this change. So you're not being sexual towards me because maybe you don't like me that way or love me that way anymore. And maybe you're not being romantic towards me because I've disappointed you somehow. But I don't think that's really the case. I think it tends to be there's other things that have taken priority. So as the relationship progresses and more things become challenging, that sex and romance almost disappears, can almost disappear from a relationship. And then when that happens, we use the wrong behavior to get it back. So watch this.
I'm listening.
Let's pretend you and I are in a couple relationship.
Yeah.
And you're the sex person, I'm the romance person. Okay, I value romance.
I value sex.
Okay, so I pegged us right. So if I want more romance from you, I need to be more sexual. And if you want more sex from me, you need to be more romantic. It's a little bit like Gary Chapman's 5 love languages.
Sound like the chicken and the egg.
It is a little bit, it's like you need to give to get. It's a reciprocal connection. Sex and romance are intimately tied together. And if I want more of one, I probably need to do more of the other to be able to create a relationship where my partner wants to do the part that they were mostly fulfilling. So without that, if I demand it, like I might say, you're never romantic anymore, or like the song, you don't bring me flowers anymore.
Because I'm telling you, if I bring you flowers and start massaging your back.
Yeah. Right. So when you become more romantic without expecting sex in return, it's just the romance, then the other person starts to feel more voluntarily sexual. But if you grab her and you throw her on the counter and you just start, it's like,
That's how they do it in the movies.
Right, that's how they do it in the movies. That's not the way to create an environment where the other person wants to contribute in the way you hope that they would. And it's the same way with romance. If I want more romance, this could be something I've seen many times in relationships. You come home from work, you sit down on the couch, you're watching TV, I might come and snuggle up against you, I might start kissing on you, maybe I even sit on your lap. And then you mistake that as foreplay and you're already, come on, let's go. And it's like, no man, I'm just showing you how much I love you. And you want to go.
Something like teasing.
Yeah, exactly. That's the perception. So can you see the different perceptions of what's happening aren't necessarily accurate. And the expectation is, if I'm more romantic with you, you'll be more romantic with me. And you might think if I'm more sexual with you, then you'll be more sexual with me. That's not how it tends to show up in relationships. It's more likely, if you want more romance, you need to be more sexual. And if you want more sex, you need to be more romantic. But not necessarily expecting, here's the expectation part, that when you do that, instantaneously, your partner's going to want more sex. You're going to have to do it consistently. You're going to have to show that this isn't just a thing that I'm using to get what I want. This is me expressing a way that I love you that you really can perceive as love, so that you'll want to love me in return the way that I like to be loved.
So here's the thing that comes to mind for me is that we have to be careful with false advertising. And I'm talking about that false advertising that we do when we're dating, that I'm always bringing you flowers, I'm taking you on lavish trips, I'm buying you expensive gifts. And then once we're married, I figured that all of that romance and stuff is really over.
Right, because I got the girl now.
I got the girl now. Or, from the woman's perspective, if she was always giving the good sex. I have one friend, this is a true story, that he and his then fiance hadn't had sex. So they saved sex for marriage. And she had told him that, man, I tell you what, once we get married, boy, I'm going to give it to you the way you ain't never had it before. And, so he's a sexual creature, so he was excited about it, looking forward to it. And what he found after they got married is that she thought that sex was primarily for procreation, right? And so she didn't give that level of sex that she had indicated that he was going to get. So can you imagine that disappointment sat in early? And so so how, now that we have some disagreement of how much we should be having sex, whether or not we should be having sex at all, how do we get to a place that's healthy?
I just want to say, if you have any topics or areas that you would like Richard and I to focus on in future videos, just drop a comment here. Send us an email at the address that's on the screen.